Welcome to the section of international business, and today we would be elaborating upon the balance of payments, and we'll read through the RBI report, which is the latest report for quarter 1 of 2020 and 21. Structure of balance of payments. We have discussed already though, but what is balance of payments? Balance of payments is an organized account of all economic transactions between a country, let's say India, and the rest of the world, carried out in a particular time period. Also, we can say that if a country archives all the inflows and outflows of funds in a statement, they can be referred to as balance of payments. So what is the structure of balance of payment? The structure depends on the concepts of double entry bookkeeping. It is essentially a double entry bookkeeping system. Now this implies that all the inflows of funds are placed on the credit side and all sorts of outflows of funds are debited. Now the balance of payments accounting differs from the business accounting in one aspect, that in the balance of payments accounting, the credits are on the left hand side and the debits are on the right hand side, whereas it is different in case of business accounting. You are all accounting students and you know that well enough. See, this is the structure of balance of payments. So this is the trade balance, this is capital account, this is the current account. These three comes under this structure, and then there are certain errors and omissions and foreign exchange reserves also, which any country maintains for contingencies as well. So one by one we'll see all these items. Trade balance, we have discussed it before. It is the difference between exports and imports of items. It typically is referenced as visible or tangible item. Now, in case of exports are higher compared to imports, what will you see? You will see trade surplus. But if imports are more than exports, then what do you have? Trade deficit. So, trade balance shows whether a nation enjoys a trade surplus or trade deficit. Of course, all the countries would like to have trade surplus. Developing countries, they usually have trade deficit because their imports are more than the exports. The trade balance is part of current account. Now, what is current account? It is the account where merchandise trade is entered first. Now, there are actually a large number of distinct items which belong to the goods category. Export receipts are shown on the credit side and imports are shown on the debit side. The second item that is recorded in the current account is invisibles. What are invisibles? It consists of trade in services, dividends, unilateral receipts from the salary transfers from the people living outside India, then investment income, etc. Now, after entering the details, balancing is performed for the current account. Now, this balance is referred to as the balance of current account. When debits are more than credits, deficit occurs. Current account surplus will take place when credits are higher than debits. Now, current account balance is extremely important. It exhibits a country's earning and payments in foreign currency. A surplus balance improves the country's financial position. So it may be utilized for growth and development of the country. What is capital account? Capital account includes all the short-term and long-term transactions between a country and the world. Usually, these types of flows of money are related to saving and investments. But speculation has turned into a major component of the account in recent times. In the capital account, both direct and portfolio foreign investment is recorded. External assistance and commercial borrowing are presented net repayment. Direct investment identifies the money which moves across national boundaries with the intention of investing in a business. Portfolio investment moves across national boundaries with the intention of purchasing shares and bonds. The official reserves means the reserves of gold and foreign exchange kept by the Reserve Bank of India to be used by the government. Errors and omissions. As you all know, with the double book entry system, keeping concept for every credit, there exists a matching debit, right? And there must be a balance in balance of payments because it is double entry. But in reality, balance of payment may not balance. How and why? Once various types of international financial flows are recorded, the statistical discrepancy referred to as errors and omissions is also recorded. The statistical discrepancy occurs due to complications associated with collecting balance of payments data. Now you can find different sources of data which occasionally differs in approach. For instance, merchandise is shipped in March, however, the payments are received in April. If statistics are compiled on 31st March, the numbers will be different. The errors and omission amount is equal to the amount required to balance both the sides. It is useful to keep in mind that whenever past figures for balance of payments are adjusted as time passes by, the figures for net errors and omissions get smaller and smaller as the errors are located and fixed. Foreign exchange reserves. Foreign exchange reserves exhibit the reserves that are kept in the form of foreign currencies. If the overall balance is surplus, it is moved to the official reserves account, which raises the foreign exchange reserves. It may be in the form of dollars, pounds, gold, or special drawing rights which are drawn by the governments. Structure of balance of payments, in that we are going to even discuss if there exists a deficit, a sum equal to the deficit is taken from the official reserves account, bringing the balance of payment into equilibrium. When surplus is moved to the foreign exchange reserve, it is displayed as minus in that specific year's balance of payments account. The minus sign signifies a rise in foreign exchange and a plus sign exhibits the borrowing of foreign exchange from the forex account in order to meet the deficit. Now the balance of payment measures all flows of money between India and the rest of the world. The main aspect is to understand the difference between the current account and the capital account and understand the connection between them. The equilibrium and disequilibrium in the balance of payments. Now, before we analyze the causes of disequilibrium in the balance of payments, we would like to explain what is meant by equilibrium in the balance of payments. When we add up all the demand for foreign currency and all the sources from which it comes, these two amounts are necessarily equal, and thus the overall account of balance of payments necessarily balance or must always be in equilibrium. What then do we mean by when we say that balance of payments of a country is in equilibrium or disequilibrium? As a matter of fact, when we speak of equilibrium or disequilibrium in the balance of payments, we refer to the balance on those parts of the accounts which do not include the accommodating items such as borrowing from IMF, use of SDRs, drawing from reserves of foreign currency held by central bank, etc. When excluding these accommodating items, there is neither deficit nor surplus in the overall balance of payments. It is said to be in the equilibrium. When in this sense there is either deficit or surplus. Now the balance of payment is said to be in the disequilibrium. So the deficit in the balance of payments can be financed by drawings from IMF, use of SDRs, drawings from reserves of foreign currencies, and loan and aid received from abroad. Now, for example, in 2001 and 2, we added to our foreign exchange reserves to the tune of 11,757 million US dollars. However, for previous several years, India's balance of payment on current account was in deficit. To finance the deficits, India borrowed from IMF or from other countries or even resorted to commercial borrowings from abroad. But India's balance of payments for the year 2001 and 2 was favorable. However, a more important and popular concept of balance of payments equilibrium has been of basic balance. The concept of basic balance is based on the idea of autonomous items in the balance of payments. The autonomous items in the balance of payments are those which cannot be influenced or changed so easily or quickly by the government, and they are determined by some long term factors. In this concept of basic balance, besides the items in the current account, the long term capital movements both on private or government account contained in the capital account balance of payments are regarded as autonomous. Now, on the other hand, in the capital account, short term capital movements such as borrowing from IMF or central banks of other countries, drawings from special drawing rights, changes in foreign exchange reserves, these are transitory and of accommodating nature and are therefore excluded from the concept of basic balance of equilibrium. The recourse has to be made to these accommodating items. These are called compensatory items. They ensure equality between payments and receipts of foreign exchange. Now, changes in the compensatory items are made so as to offset the surplus or deficit in the autonomous items. When autonomous movements cancel out over some appropriate time period and there is no need for compensatory movements, the balance of payments is in equilibrium. Now, this equilibrium is a state of balance which can be sustained without intervention by the government. The concept of balance of payments in the sense of basic balance can be represented by exports minus imports plus long term surveillance is equal to zero. It is the long term capital movements which we are talking about in this equation. So, like I've told you, exports including invisible items comes as X, M stands for imports including invisible items, and LTC stands for the long term capital movements. If exports minus imports is positive, that is, exports are more than imports, then for balance of payments to be in equilibrium, long term capital movements will be negative and equal to X minus M. So this implies that there will be net capital outflow. On the other hand, if imports are greater than exports, then balance of payment to be in equilibrium, long term capital must be positive. That is, there will be net capital inflow to offset the deficit in the current account. When the balance of payments of a country is in equilibrium, the demand for the domestic currency is equal to its supply. The demand and supply situation is thus neither favorable nor unfavorable. If the balance of payments moves against a country, adjustments must be made by encouraging exports of goods, services, or other forms of exports, or by discouraging imports of all kinds. No country can have permanently unfavorable balance of payments. Total liabilities and total assets of nations as of individuals must balance in the long run. So this does not mean that balance of payment of a country should be in equilibrium individually with every other country with which she has trade relations. This is not necessary, nor is it the case in the real world. Trade relations are multilateral. India, for example, may have balance of payments deficit with United States and surplus with United Kingdom and or other countries. But each country in the long run cannot receive more value than she has exported to other countries taken together. Equilibrium in the balance of payments, therefore, is a sign of soundness of a country's economy. But disequilibrium may arise either for short or long periods. A continued disequilibrium indicates that the country is heading towards economic and financial bankruptcy. Every country, therefore, must try to maintain balance of payments in equilibrium. To know how this can be done involves the study of the causes of disequilibrium. What is equilibrium? It is the state of balance of payments over the relevant time period which makes it possible to sustain an open economy without severe unemployment on a continuing basis. So, what are the essentials in this definition? The relevant time period, openness of economy, absence of unemployment, and continuing basis of equilibrium. So, the period is generally 1 year. Thus, seasonal inequalities between exports and imports is not a sign of disequilibrium. When the balance of payments of a country is in equilibrium, the demand for domestic currency is equal to its supply. The demand and supply situation is thus neither favorable nor unfavorable. If the balance of payments moves against a country, adjustment must be made by encouraging export of goods, services, or other forms of exports, or by discouraging imports of all kinds. No country can have a permanently unfavorable balance of payments, though it is possible and is quite common for some countries to have a permanently unfavorable balance of trade. Total liabilities and total assets of nations, as of individuals, must balance in the long run. So, this does not mean that the balance of payment of a country should be in equilibrium individually with every other country with which he has trade relations. As I've told you, this is not necessary. So, trade relations are multilateral and it cannot have the individual balance with all the other countries. Balance of payments for India for 1980 to 83 gives, it shows that a heavily adverse balance of payments on current account. When the visible and invisible exports of countries are less than all her imports over a long period and the difference is big, steps have to be taken to bridge the gap. Now, what kind of steps are taken? One can be improving the balance of trade through import restrictions and measures of export promotion. Since balance of payments become adverse chiefly on account of excess of imports over exports, the most urgent step is to be taken in this direction only. A country having an adverse balance of payments must to check imports or to stimulate exports or do both. Imports can be checked either by total prohibition or by levying import duties or by quota system. Another method is adopting of measures of import substitutions, that is, trying to produce in the country what it currently imports from abroad. Exports can be stimulated by measures of export promotion, that is, granting bounties or other concessions to industrialists and exporters. Another method is deflation. Under this method, total money income in the economy is sought to be reduced so that the aggregate demand in the country falls. As a result, the people tend to import less and their demand for home produced goods becomes lesser, releasing more of their exports. Owing to a fall in aggregate demand, prices also fall, so that the country becomes a good market to buy from and a bad market to sell in. In this way, imports get discouraged and exports are stimulated, therefore, correcting the adverse balance of payment. But deflation is not a healthy method because the reduction of money income hits business, trade, and industry hard and brings about depression and unemployment. Now, what has been the key features of India's balance of payments in quarter one of 2020 and 21? There has been this RBI report which we'll read out. So, India's current account balance recorded a surplus of 19.8 billion US dollars, that is 3.9% of GDP in quarter one, on a top of a surplus of zero point 0.6 billion US dollars in the preceding quarter. So, in quarter four of 2019-20, a deficit of 15 billion US dollars was recorded a year ago. The surplus in the current account in quarter one was on account of a sharp contraction in the trade deficit to 10 billion US dollars to steeper decline in merchandise imports relative to exports on a year-on-year basis. Net services receipts remained stable, primarily on the back of net earnings from computer services. Private transfer receipts, mainly representing remittances by Indian employed overseas, amounted to 18.2 billion US dollars, a decline of 8.7% from their level a year ago. Net outgo from the primary income account, primarily reflecting net overseas investment income payments, increased to 7.7 billion US dollars from 6.3 billion US dollars a year ago. In the financial account, net foreign direct investment recorded outflow of zero point 0.4 billion US dollars as against inflows of 14 billion US dollars in quarter 1 of 2019-20. Net foreign portfolio investments was zero point 0.6 billion dollars as compared with the 4.8 billion US dollars in quarter 1 of 2019-20, as net purchases in the equity market were offset by net sales in the debt segment. Repayment exceeding fresh disbursals, external commercial borrowings to India recorded net outflow of 1.1 billion US dollars in quarter 1 of 2020-21, as against an inflow of US 6 billion US dollars a year ago. Net inflow on account of non-resident deposits increased to 3 billion US dollars from 2.8 billion US dollars in quarter 1 of 2019-20. There was an accretion of 19.8 billion US dollars to the foreign exchange reserves on a balance of payment basis, as compared with that of US $14 billion in quarter 1 of 2019-20. This is the balance of payments situation according to RBI. We have our current account. So there is credit, debit, and net in April-June 2020, and there is a comparison of April-June 2019. So we can clearly see that our credits has increased and there has been a positive current account on account of lesser imports. Goods, we can see services here, and services have declined a little thanks to the pandemic situation. We cannot help it. Then primary income and capital account and financial accounts are being shown here. Changes in the reserves we can see. So there has been a net of negative 19.8, and there was a negative of 14 US billion dollars, and this is errors and omissions we have already done. So this is our major items of India's balance of payments. These are your references. Thank you so much for listening.